Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman, and today I'm so excited to talk with a fellow Québécoise, Dr. Èvelyne Bourdua-Roy, who lives in Quebec, just like me, but whose first language is French, not like me, and who's been a family physician in Quebec since 2015. She's the author and co-author of 7 books about low-carb diets and fasting. Dr. Bourdua-Roy regularly gives lectures and training sessions both in Canada and all around the world. And we actually met a few years ago. So it's so lovely to see her again and to have this chat about sugar, insulin resistance, metabolic health, hormones, and menopause, and lots more. We'll get to our chat in just a moment. But first, I just wanted to tell you that if you're looking for some free resources about how to get rid of cravings, then I have plenty for you. Come check out the Life After Sugar Facebook page and subscribe to the Life After Sugar YouTube channel, as well as my Instagram account at My Life After Sugar, which is where you'll get all kinds of inspiration so that you can see that it's perfectly possible to live a happy and active life even if you don't eat sugar. You can also check out my TikTok account at Netta_Life After Sugar. And you can also download my 5 tips to start getting rid of cravings. Look in the description in the show notes along with this episode. All right, so today I'm talking with Dr. Èvelyne Bourdua-Roy, who's based near Montreal in Quebec in Canada. So we're sort of neighbors. I'm only like 700 kilometers away from you, right?
Yeah, no, in Canada, it's no big deal.
No big deal. And Dr. Roy is a family doctor who is certified in obesity medicine by the American Board of Obesity Medicine, and she has a lot of expertise in metabolic medicine. And we're going to be talking today about hormones, right?
Yes.
Now, the question that I hear a lot from women, not just in their 50s, but on either side of the 50s, either side of menopause, is how do hormones affect us, not just for menopause, but for our sugar cravings and for our weight?
Such a good question, Netta. Actually, hormones impact just about everything in our bodies. Hormones are like text messages, that cells and organs send each other. Could you do something for me? Or did you forget this thing? So hormones are messengers that, carry information and ask the body or parts of the body organs to do something. So when they work well. When they don't work well, that's when we start running into trouble, So in metabolic health, the main hormones that I'm interested in are insulin and, glucagon, cortisol, and all that. And that's how I started to get interested into hormones in general, because that's what, if those don't work really well, then you can develop metabolic syndrome or pre-diabetes, diabetes, obesity, and all kinds of conditions that are related to hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance, right? So this is how I started to get interested into hormones and metabolic health. But then I realized that other hormones like estrogens and progesterone and testosterone have a big impact on metabolic health and health in general. So now I have combined all of these hormones together to help patients get better. And It's fascinating to see what hormones like progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone can do to people, not just women in on either side of the 50-year-old on the 50s, but men also, or younger or older as well.
So can I ask you, we tend to focus a lot on insulin when we're talking about weight gain and fasting and so on. And we tend to, well, myself at least, forget that insulin is also a hormone. We tend to think of the sex hormones, progesterone, estrogen. And can you explain a little bit the kind of, you said they're messengers, the hormones, but how do they like work together to create metabolic health or ill health?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, for instance, insulin, to simplify it, insulin is a hormone secreted by your pancreas, mainly when you eat carbs, anything that will turn into glucose molecules in your body. So any starches, any fruit, for instance, when you digest a food that contains carbohydrates, you will chop it up into little molecules of glucose, and that glucose will go into your bloodstream. Some of it will go into your bloodstream and like go around and around and around, and it can provide energy to any cell in the body. Any cell in the body can use glucose for fuel. Some cells can also use fatty acids, some cells can use ketones, but every single cell in the human body can use glucose. But in order to use that glucose, cells need they need sort of like a key to unlock a door. And that's what insulin does. So when you have glucose in your circulation because you've just eaten, your pancreas will sense that there's sugar in the body is toxic. It's called glucotoxicity. We don't want that. It does damages inside the blood vessels and all that. So the body wants to tightly regulate how much sugar there is going on in the circulation at any given time. And for that, the body requires insulin from the pancreas. So the pancreas secretes insulin. Insulin goes into the circulation. It goes and it knocks on the door of the little cells, and it unlocks the door. And so there's a door that opens, sort of, and then glucose can go into the cell and can be transformed into energy. And this is normal, and this is what we want. This is normal physiology. The problem arises when there is too much glucose going around too often. So it's both a question of quantity and frequency. If you have too much glucose going around and you have too much insulin, you have a lot of insulin being secreted often, eventually, because it is too much, it's out of balance, the cells will start to resist. They will start to say, no, I'm not opening, or I'm only opening a little bit and not too much. And so they start to resist the message of insulin, which is to open itself, right? So that is what we call insulin resistance. And the issue with that is that the more resistant your body is to insulin, the more the sicker you will become, the more metabolic dysfunction will develop. The problem also with that is that if you have a lot of insulin, insulin does a lot of things in the body. It doesn't just open up the glucose channels to let the glucose enter the cells. It does all kinds of things. One of the things that it does is to signal to the body that it's time to store fat. So it's the master fat storing hormone in the body. It's not the only one, and it's not it's not the only decider, but it's the main one. We call it like the supreme queen of all hormones when it comes to fat storage. So if you have a lot of insulin, you get a lot of the signal to store body fat. And you also get a signal to not burn any body fat or not burn any of the fatty acids you just ate part of your meal. So it inhibits fat burning and lipolysis, basically, which puts you in a metabolic state in which, you gain weight. You have a lot of energy reserves in your body, but you cannot burn them. So you're hungry and you want to eat more, and your only source of energy is what you eat and the sugar that is stored a little bit in your muscle and your liver and all that. So you're stuck in a metabolic mode of storing and being hungry and thinking about food all the time, because your own body reserves are prohibited, they're closed, they're inaccessible, and that's hormonally driven. So it's not a question of willpower at this point. It's a question that if you have a lot of insulin in your body, then you cannot burn your own energy reserves. Also, insulin, what it does to the kidneys, it tells the kidneys, hey boys, you're going to retain water and salt and sodium. So when the kidneys get the message from insulin to retain water and salt, what do you think happens?
Do you pee more?
High blood pressure.
Oh.
You pee less because it retains the water and it retains the sodium. So you get high blood pressure. So most of my patients that have idiopathic, idiopathic hypertension is usually caused by insulin resistance.
Huh.
It's called idiopathic because we don't know, the real cause of it. We haven't found a real cause like a kidney disease or whatever.
I've never heard my doctor pronounce the term insulin resistance.
I don't know any doctor who doesn't care deeply about the health and what happens to their patient, but unfortunately, insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, and metabolic dysfunction is not so much something we're taught in med school. And I wasn't taught that in med school either. And I did medicine later in my life. Like I had another career before, and I graduated in 2015. And that's only in 2016 that I read Dr. Jason Fung's book, Obesity Code. And that's when I found out about insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, and all that. That's when I learned that type 2 diabetes is usually reversible. I had no concept of that before. And that's when I learned also the role that plays insulin in obesity or in metabolic dysfunction. I did not learn that in school, and that's really too bad, because I know it takes time for when we figure things out, sort of, or when science advances, and it takes time for this to actually end up in books and end up in schools and to be taught. It takes a while, but unfortunately, at this point in time, it's not something that is commonly taught in schools, in faculties of medicine, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is unfortunate, because it means that we as patients have to be our own advocates. We have to look for the information ourselves. We have to even know that there is information to look for and where to find it. And of course, our sort of natural reaction is to check with the doctor, right?
Of course.
But
It's hard to find reliable. I know it's hard to find reliable information out there, because nowadays we have access to lots of information, but that also means that sometimes the information is not reliable, or it's not from a good source of information, or sometimes it is a good source of information, but they're looking at the information from a specific perspective or point of view. So yeah, obviously that's normal that people turn to the doctors for more information on that, but it's unfortunate that at this point insulin resistance is not more commonly known amongst doctors, I would say.
Absolutely. Unfortunate. That's a very polite way of putting it. And one other thing that I find unfortunate is for myself, I am 53, I'm menopausal, and my doctor doesn't seem to be able to explain to me the role that my hormones are playing in not just in menopause, but metabolically. And I'd like you to explain, if you can, please, how those hormones that are involved in peri-menopause and menopause are connected to our metabolic health.
Sure. Well, first of all, peri-menopause is the period of time that precedes full menopause. Menopause is 12 months without periods. But you don't know that you're into your menopause until it's been 12 months, right? So the period before the official stamp of menopause approval, you're in perimenopause, and the average age in Quebec or in Canada in general is 51, 52 years old. But now we know that perimenopause can start occurring 7 to 10 years before the actual menopause. So that means most women in their 40s are probably starting to be in perimenopause, and definitely if you're in your late 40s or early 50s, even if you still have your periods very regularly, or if you still have your periods at all, you're most likely to be in perimenopause. And what's important to know about perimenopause is that the first hormone that starts to become irregularly irregular is progesterone. So, and it's irregular. It's already in a normal cycle, like when you're 20 years old, super fertile and all that. It's already irregular. Every day is a bit different, right? But it's even worse when you're perimenopause, because every day is different and every month is different. Some months your ovaries and your whole body works normally, and some months it has a harder time to produce the amount of hormones that your body is used to, which is one of the reasons why we think it's in our brain, that it's in our mind. We are the problem, because, all of a sudden we don't understand what's going on. We're irritable, we're tired, we're, snappy, we're not patient. And then the next day or the next week or the next month, everything is okay. So we think we're the problem.
Yeah.
And that it's our fault, or we need to be more patient, or what's going on with me. Typically in clinic, my patients tell me, I don't recognize myself. I don't know what is going on. This is not me. This is typical. And progesterone, what it does, okay, so it becomes irregularly irregular. And progesterone is the hormone of deep sleep, of zen, of patience. It's also a hormone that helps with your bladder. It's a hormone that helps not feeling all body aches, muscular and joint pains and all that. So it's a hormone that helps you regulate all kinds of functions in the body. So, for instance, sleep. If typically progesterone, when it starts to do all kinds of irregularities, women will wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, eyes wide open, but tired. The brain is awake, but the body's really tired. Sometimes, you wake up early and you're like, oh, I think I'm going to go clean my house. It's not that kind of wake up. It's the kind of wake up, what is going on? Why am I awake? I want to sleep. Please, body, I have a really important day today. I have stuff to do. Please fall back asleep. And you don't, obviously, or you do, and it takes forever. And then it's light sleep. You hear all the noises in the house. You hear your husband snoring and everything. It's not good sleep. So you wake up, you're tired. If you wake up and you're tired, what are you going to do? The whole day is going to be a struggle. If you haven't slept enough, this is times and times again proven by science. If you haven't slept enough, your frontal lobe is not going to do a good job today at helping you stay on course with your life objective or your health objective and all that. So you're going to be tired. You're going to want to eat energy, quick energy. Your brain is going to be filled with thoughts of food for quick energy. And your frontal lobe, the voice of reason, the voice that said, no, don't eat that. That's not good. Don't do that. That's bad for you. Don't drink that. Or, the voice of reason, it's like it goes away on a little vacation, and it's more like the reward system or the amygdala that take over. Those are parts of the brain that want pleasure. They want dopamine. They want satisfaction. They want quick gratification. They want something nice now. And the frontal lobe that says, no, we don't do that. Not there so much. Not so helpful.
Off on vacation. Yeah, it describes to a T what I've been experiencing, despite the fact that I eat no sugar myself, certainly no refined sugar or added sugars, not even starches and no sweeteners. And yet I was still experiencing what you just described in the sense of sleep issues, not recognizing myself. I mean, obviously it was all my husband's fault, just because he was that annoying for 18 months, really.
Sure. bet when he was chewing his food, it got really annoying, more than in
Yeah.
the past 30 years of living with him.
Yes, and then he snored more,
Yes, of course.
during my menopause symptoms. It's crazy how that happens. I just want to take a quick break to say that if this is your first time here, then welcome and thank you for listening to this podcast. And whether you're new or a regular and you haven't yet rated or reviewed this podcast, could I ask you to scroll down and tap on the stars to rate this podcast and also to write a short review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. I love reading your reviews, and when you rate and review this podcast, not only does it encourage me to continue making new episodes, but it also helps to share this podcast and have more people see it so that we can help more people feel better and lose weight with less sugar. So again, thank you for rating and reviewing this podcast and for spreading the word about sugar.
Yes, indeed. But if you think about it too, perimenopause and menopause itself is a time where women are more prone to have insulin resistance by default. That is Mother Nature that wanted it this way. So if you're a bit more by default physiologically insulin resistant, just if you are more insulin resistant, then it's easier to gain weight on the belly too. So that's why perimenopause and menopause women, all of a sudden they never gain weight on their bellies, and all of a sudden they have a little belly going on that's insulin resistant. You see that even in thin women who have never gained weight their whole life, all of a sudden they have a belly. That is insulin resistance brought upon by the perimenopause and menopause state.
Amazing.
And so if on top of that, you are tired and you want a boost of dopamine, and you're thinking about food and gratification, and you eat more, well, then it's a sure recipe to gain weight. I see that all the time. Yeah. We're human, Yeah,
we're human, exactly. And I often say real life carries on whether or not you eat sugar. And being sugar-free for myself does not mean that, it's all unicorns and marshmallows. Well, certainly not marshmallows in my case, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
And I'd said it in joke that it's all my menopause symptoms are all my husband's fault for being so annoying for them. But actually, joking aside, this doesn't just, all these symptoms for menopause, it doesn't just affect women, does it? It also affects men.
Absolutely. I mean, there's andropause for men. So for women around our 50s, we start not having our periods, and then it's menopause, and basically our estrogen and progesterone levels drop, and then everything else seems to drop when that happens. Your bone density, your muscle mass, your cognition, your memory, your skin, even the lubrication and elasticity of your vagina. I mean, everything goes downhill from that moment if you choose not to have hormone replacement therapy. But it's a sort of a quick drop if you want. It's over a few years that it really drops once you get to menopause, because you've had 7 to 10 years of perimenopause that you did not even know about, and that was probably not addressed by your doctor. If it was addressed, it was addressed from the point of view of the symptoms. So if you had all of a sudden anxiety that you never had, maybe you got prescribed an antidepressant or anxiolytic or something like that. If you gain weight, maybe you got prescribed something for weight loss. If you had all of a sudden acid reflux, then you got prescribed an anti-acid. On and on and on, because it's hard to put the pieces together when it's perimenopause, because it is so irregular, and because as a society we are not used to discuss perimenopause and to acknowledge its existence. But if you take blood samples from women in perimenopause and you do measure the hormones, you will see the huge fluctuations and the huge irregularities from one month to another. So it's not in our brains, it's actually a real entity, perimenopause. But So women have to be advocates for themselves, like you said before, because usually doctors are not really trained to think that all the symptoms a woman is presenting could be all related to the irregularities of progesterone. Estrogen is a hormone that is also starts to be dysregulated in menopause, but it's a bit later. It's the first one for the first few years of dysregulation. Even if you have regular period, just the same as before, every month on the clock, you can still be in perimenopause. It will be the progesterone issue. Estrogens become later in the process. But for men, first of all, just healthy men, for instance, will have a slow decline in testosterone later on in life, and it will be, if there is a decline, because not every man, or all men have a decline, but some of them, the decline is sharper than others, and some it's such a small decline that they don't even notice anything. But men have a decline in their production of testosterone. It's so soft over decades that, most men don't necessarily suffer from it when it's a healthy metabolism with a healthy normal testosterone decline, which is happening less and less, I would think, from what I see in my clinic. Men start to have a testosterone deficiency much earlier in life, and much more significant than before. So so men don't go through menopause, the equivalent andropause, in the sense that men can serve child until they die, which is not the case with women, right? But if you have metabolic dysfunction, or if your husband or somebody you love who's a male has metabolic dysfunction, such as pre-diabetes, metabolic syndrome, pre-diabetes, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, or obesity, overweight, there's significant chances that they might also have low testosterone. Usually they go together, sort of, and it's part of the guidelines to check somebody with type 2 diabetes, a man with type 2 diabetes, to check their testosterone levels to make sure that they are at least normal, because it's not uncommon that they are low. And the problem with men is that testosterone is their main hormone. It's the hormone for men. It's the hormone of muscle mass. It's the hormone of good metabolism. It's the hormone of drive, of strength, obviously, but also of good mood, cognition, memory, all of that. And if you start not having enough testosterone to support all those functions, well, then you become you have less energy, so you don't want to do things. You're not motivated. You don't have the drive to take on projects, to do stuff, to get stuff, like to finish that renovation you started 6 months ago in the garage or whatever, right? And your metabolism is slower. It's harder for you to metabolize sugar. It's harder for you so you tend to gain weight, and you tend to lose muscle mass. And the less muscle mass you have, the more your basic metabolism will slow down. And if your metabolism slow down, then you will gain weight much more faster and easier. So it's a vicious circle that can develop for men. So it's really important that if you think that's your case, or that's the case of someone you love in your around you, in your family, it's relevant to go and ask the doctor to maybe check the testosterone levels every time, pretty much. Not every time, I would say, but the majority of the time that I've checked testosterone levels in my patients who have metabolic dysfunction, I have found low testosterone. And the reason why it's relevant to go and get it tested or checked out is because there is something that we can do about it. Just like for women, we can provide bioidentical hormone replacement, we can do that for men as well. And since we have that available nowadays as the therapeutic options, then it's worth exploring whether there is a deficiency and whether a treatment might be appropriate.
Ah, very interesting. Because, I mean, HRT for women, in my age group at least, is sort of relatively well known, but I didn't know that they could have that for men as well. So,
Yes, definitely. So it's worth having a discussion with your doctor about it. And by the way, Netta, you know that women also produce a little bit of testosterone, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it also tends to just disappear during perimenopause and menopause. So for women, we produce a lot less than for men, but it's still the hormone of libido, and it's still the hormone linked to drive, motivation, energy, and muscle mass in women. So typically, women who come into my office in perimenopause or menopause, we check their testosterone levels, and they're usually extremely low. And of course, the women, they complain of low libido. Actually, I should say they don't complain. They say their husband or their partners complain of low libido. They don't have any libido, but they don't care. They're
yeah,
like, I don't have time for this, you know. I don't have any interest. I don't suffer from it. But obviously, it causes problems in the relationship, you know. As if it, so it's something also that can be addressed. We can prescribe a small dose of testosterone to women who have libido issues, and the interesting thing about that is that it can be given to women, you know, regardless if they had a history of breast cancer or any kind of hormone dependent, so-called hormone dependent cancers. So it's an interesting treatment option for women. And by the way, if you prescribe a woman a testosterone cream, we just usually tend to want to put it on the labia, and that gives a cure of youth to the vagina. So the vagina goes back in time and becomes young again with, you know, good
yeah,
lubrication, elasticity, and a good architecture. So it's something worth discussing for sure, but things can be done if you have vagina dryness, if you have pain during intercourse, if you have zero libido and it's an issue in your life. Definitely it can be discussed, and it can, you know, something can be tried. There are therapeutic options for women in that case.
yeah, totally. Good to know. Good to know. And my last question is this. So, can HRT, hormone replacement therapy, for women, let's just concentrate on women for the time being, can it help with insulin resistance, losing weight, and losing your cravings?
Yes, it can. It's not a miracle. It's not you're going to start bioidentical hormone replacement therapy and all of a sudden the weight is just going to melt, but it contributes. It helps. Everything helps. Like what I find is when you have all kinds of little good habits and little things that help you all together, they work in synergy to help you get in the right, you know, move in the right direction and sustain your good lifestyle habits. Because at the bottom of um, any weight gain or any sugar craving or anything that is making you feel out of balance, at the bottom of that, at the basis of that, is still lifestyle habits. You need to have good lifestyle habits. You need to sleep enough. You need to sleep well, in duration and quality. You need to exercise. You need to breathe. You need to manage your stress. You need to manage your emotions. You need to eat well. You need, you know, all those
Yeah.
things
Oh,
are
a lot.
irreplaceable, and they will never come into a pill, never. However, um, if you do treat, for instance, you take hormone replacement therapy and all of a sudden you sleep much better because you have enough progesterone to have that deep sleep, right? Well, then that's going to help. But you still have to take care of your sleep and make sure you know, you have good sleep hygiene, right?
Yeah.
It's going to help with the cravings too. If you're less tired and if you're less irritable and if your emotions are more balanced, it's going to help with the sugar cravings. But is it going to eradicate them magically? It will not, because you had them when you were younger and your hormones were working perfectly, right? So it's
Mhm.
not just a question of finding a solution in a pill. We wish there was a solution in a pill, you know, and there are lots of pills that can help, but they will not replace good habits and treatment for sugar addiction. That you have to do the work, you know, but you can get help. You can get all kinds of little help here and there. Exercising is a good help that doesn't come in a pill. You have to do the work, but definitely hormones can help. So if your hormones are properly balanced, That'll help to stop gain weight, and you may even lose some weight. That'll help with the insulin resistance. But of course, if you eat a diet very rich in carbs, you will not solve your insulin resistance problem or your hyperinsulinemia, which leads to weight gain and sugar roller coasters and sugar cravings. You must have talked about this before, but if you eat often, many meals a day, and if your meals are rich in carbs, your blood sugar levels are roller coasters, and that triggers hunger hormones, and we don't want to do that. So, and it's worse if you haven't slept. It's worse if you're irritable, you just had a fight with your boss because you're irritable, because you're in perimenopause. All that doesn't help, but it's not going to replace obviously the work that needs to be done around that. It's just going to be a little help.
Yeah, to be able to do that work.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, right. That is fascinating. Thank you. If people want to get in touch with you, I think you have some services. Are they just in French?
Well, yes. Now I do see new patients in the South Shore of Montreal in Saint-Bruno de Montarville. But I can only see people in Quebec for now. Maybe I could do maybe telemedicine with the rest of Canada, but definitely not with the US. It's a question of medical license and medical insurance and all that. I am not a doctor in the United States or anywhere else in the world. But I do take new patients, and I take new patients for metabolic consult or hormone consultations. So they can call my clinic, which is called Clinique CMIE, CMIE.
Okay.
Yeah, find it on Google. And otherwise, most of the stuff I do is in French.
All right. Yeah, well, your English is fantastic.
No. I find it so rusty. It's a rusty morning today.
Well, I don't know many people who are able to talk about hormones, hormone therapy, and insulin resistance in their second language.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge for sure. But because you talk about that stuff all the time in your second language too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, French is my second language, so we're quits.
You're right.
Thank you so much for explaining this so clearly, and I'm 100% sure that it will be 100% helpful for the listeners of this podcast. Thank you.
I hope so. It was my pleasure to be here. Can I just say one last thing, Netta? Do you
Sure.
let me? You'll edit it if you don't want it. Still nowadays in 2023, when women go to their doctors and say, I think I'm in perimenopause and I think my hormones might, be dysregulated. Could we please check them? And these are my symptoms. Some doctors will not be very open to that concept. And I want to say to women, it is real. It is not in your brain, and it is not in your imagination. So if your doctor doesn't agree or doesn't want to check or doesn't want to help you with that, find another doctor, because you are not the problem. It's those hormonal dysregulation in perimenopause, they happen to every woman, and as a society we're sort of used to sort of dismissing what happens to women in general, right? And to say, oh, tough it out, or go manage your emotions and all that. I mean, so seriously, my message to all women is that if you cannot find a doctor who will listen to you and take you seriously, then please go find another doctor, because it's a matter, it's your health, and it's your physical health, metabolic health, but it's also your mental health that is at stake.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yes, I second that message. Thank you. Thank you, Èvelyne.
Thank you for having me.
All right, got that message loud and clear. Ladies, if you're experiencing any kind of hormonal dysregulation, whether it's to do with perimenopause, menopause, or anything else, I would say that just like with sugar, it's up to us as patients and as consumers to be our own advocates, which means, well, looking for information and being educated before we go see our doctor. I have huge respect for doctors, including mine and including Èvelyne, with whom I just talked. But I still think that we owe it to ourselves and to our doctors to be well-informed patients. And I totally get that if you're anything like me, you don't necessarily have a background in medicine or health sciences, and we get bombarded with such contradictory and confusing information that it's difficult to know what to educate ourselves about and where to find reliable information. And that's where I come in. I often say that you're better off learning about sugar and metabolic health and everything we've been talking about in this episode and in the whole podcast from a teacher rather than from a nutritionist. No offense to nutritionists, but sometimes what you really need is a simple, clear explanation without all the jargon. And that's what you get in the After Sugar Club. The After Sugar Club is a lower price monthly subscription, and when you join, you have access to a library of self-study resources that I've created for you with my experience of 8 years of living happily sugar-free and craving-free. You can join the After Sugar Club at any time so that you can reduce or cut sugar and feel confident that you're well on the way to better health and especially better metabolic health. As an After Sugar Club member, you'll be part of our friendly community of encouraging members who are on the same path to cutting sugar and who lift each other up. We have group check-in calls twice a month so that you can get the support and the accountability you need. The After Sugar Club is open all year round, and the link to join is in the show notes. Or go to aftersugarclub.com and look in the top menu for the After Sugar Club. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.